The USC Trojans concluded spring drills on Thursday. Now it's just up to the spring game, which is coming your way at noon Pacific time. And we bring in Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles, who's got a lot on his plate in regards to taking in the spring game. And Nick, a lot that you would like to see on Saturday.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks I think this team needs answered. There's a lot of good potential answers for many of these, but until we actually get guys, into a game situation, it's difficult to tell. Now, there's one important note. It's not really going to be a game. It's sort of just going to be a televised practice because the injury count is really high for USC. And so Helton doesn't really think he has enough guys to line them up into two teams and play each other. Doesn't want to risk any more injuries. So he's holding a lot of guys out. He's just playing it safe with a lot of guys. Some guys just can't go, period. But there are going to be some scrimmage-like situations. And one of the big questions we're going to found out is, you lost Darius Rogers and Juju Smith-Schuster to the draft / graduation. And so now the question is, who's the number one guy at wide receiver? Who steps up? Darnold did a great job last year spreading the ball around. It was not just a Juju Smith-Schuster show all the time in the passing game, which is great. But it's going to be a little difficult to answer that question on Saturday because Deontay Burnett, who had that amazing Rose Bowl game, as you all remember, he's going to be out with a head injury. Keyshawn Pye Young he's going to be out. He's got a groin injury. They're holding him back. Steven Mitchell still coming back from his knee injury from last season. He's going to be out. Trevon Sidney will be out for spring camp as well. Daniel Imatorbhebhe and Tyler Petit are both going to miss the games. So that's two tight ends there. So you've got 6 targets for Darnold who are not going to be on the field tomorrow, and his 2 top statistical wide receivers last year in terms of catches have moved on. So, who steps up at wide receiver, I think, is going to be a very big question. For all the talk about how great Darnold is and Heisman hype and all these sorts of things, he's still got to throw the ball to somebody, and in theory, they're going to catch it. So we really want to see who's that go-to guy. When you got to get it, when it's 3rd and long and you got to get a first down, who's going to be that number one guy you're going to be looking for? It seems like Deontay Burnett would be a good front runner, but we won't see if that's the case tomorrow because he'll be out. Speaking of injuries, the offensive line right now is just wrecked. Tons and tons of injuries, top to bottom, are all injured. You got Chuma Adoga, he's out. Andrew Voorhees, he's dealing with some injuries. He'll be out for tomorrow as well. You got Nathan Smith. You got Vianney Talamavayo. He's out. The good thing about USC is, though, that they cross-train their offensive linemen. So, they have guys who can play center and guard, tackle and center. So you got a lot of pieces moving around. So it'll be really good for a lot of these younger guys to get reps and to play multiple positions on the offensive line. But right now, there's just a lot of their top line talent is gone. And this is in addition to losing 3 of their starters to the draft from the Rose Bowl. So there is kind of nothing but question marks on the offensive line right now. So that's obviously going to be a concern. One of the great areas I'm really looking forward to is that defensive front, which at the beginning of last season was a huge area of concern for USC, but they have recruited incredibly well on the defensive front 7. And so while they do have some guys that are going to miss tomorrow, Porter Gustin's going to be out. Kenny Bigelow is still coming back from the knee injury on the D-line, so they're not going to rush him back. But they've got a ton of elite recruits at linebacker, defensive tackle coming up. Those guys need reps. I'd love to see them get out there on the field and compete. So I think the defensive front 7 tomorrow is going to be, or on Saturday, is going to be a lot of fun to watch. You're going to also want to look at, since we're on the defense, Adoree Jackson had a tremendous amount of production in the defensive backfield. I believe he had 8 passes broken up, a bevy of interceptions. The guy just was really quite good, but he's gone. Obviously, we're going to see if Jamal Cook can improve in the nickelback position. I want to see if Biggie Marshall, Adorie's counterpart on the other side at cornerback, I want to see if he can become sort of the guy who can lock down his side of the field. He had some troubles getting beat deep last season in particular. He had some troubles getting his head around to find the ball. So I really want to see, he's going to need to step up, and hopefully he has a great game. So keep an eye on who replaces Adoree. And then one of the final things I want to keep an eye on is Sam Darnold. I know we've talked about this before, Mark, has thrown quite a few interceptions in spring practice. You don't want to put too much weight into that. It's spring ball. It is what it is. This is the time when you work these things out. But he's thrown more interceptions in this spring than he has in any previous springs, in all of his previous spring practices combined. So that's a concern. And part of that could be a few reasons. One, the defense is much more improved this year. So maybe it's just the defense is playing much better. Helton likes to go ones versus ones. 2, the offensive line just might not be there right now because they're playing a lot of younger guys, a lot of guys that don't have a lot of reps. So maybe he's getting extra pressure. Maybe he's getting forced. He's also T. Martin, the offensive coordinator, has been far more aggressive in play calling and opening up the playbook for Darnold. So a lot of that could be just him getting new plays and getting new formations and new things to do while he's learning. So I'm going to be curious to see what his interception count or even just bad pass count is, or poorly chosen pass to throw. I really want to keep an eye on that in a game situation to see if it is this line, if that's the concern. Maybe the defense is just stepping up. If it's just a much better defense, then hey, nothing wrong with that. But if it's something else, or maybe he just doesn't have the newest parts of the playbook down, that's going to be an area of concern you're going to want to keep an eye on. So I don't know how many of these questions we're actually going to get answered tomorrow because, like I said, there's just a ton of injuries. It's not really going to be a full scrimmage. It's going to be more of a glorified practice, really. But this will be a great opportunity to look and see where everybody's at. It'll be their first game. I think they've played a lot of these guys, they're stepping into the limelight. They're back on television. A lot of these guys coming up did not really see much time last year. So it'll be interesting to see where those guys are at, once the lights are turned on or the cameras are turned on, the crowd's back in the stadium. So, tomorrow is going to be a good test, I think, for a lot of these younger guys. It's going to be a very necessary experience for a lot of these younger guys. But there's just a lot of areas I really want to keep an eye on Saturday.
It was noted in the Daily Trojan that at the conclusion of Thursday's practice, the final practice, that the offense ran 3 consecutive 2-point conversions against the defense and was stopped. So 2 Darnold incompletions and then capped off by a Gene Harris interception to shut the offense out of the end zone. And you mentioned Deontay Burnett, and unfortunately we don't get to see him on Saturday, but more fortunately would be to preserve him for week 1 of the regular season. But he has had such a sterling practice regimen during this spring session. According to the LA Times, he hadn't dropped a pass at that point, and we were talking about like 50 passes during practice and had not missed hardly any assignments. He was pinpoint on everything expected for him to do. So following up the Rose Bowl, it's good to hear that despite the injury, he should be fine, that he's followed up that kind of stellar performance by putting in the work to become even better and maybe be the number 1 receiver you're talking about.
Yeah, he should hopefully be able to. He came up through the scout team with Darnold, so it would make sense that Darnold's just a lot more comfortable with him. Although 50 catches in a row out of practice, that's pretty impressive. But the story you just told about the 3 2-point conversions in a row where the defense shut him out, I got to tell you right now that probably drove Clay Helton up the wall. One of the things he absolutely stresses is balance between the running and the passing game. And one of his key points of emphasis is always going to be when we need to be able to run the football and get the yards we need to get when everyone in the building knows we're going to run the football. So I would expect on Saturday to see a lot of situations like that where the offense, it's an absolute where they have to get 2 yards or 3 yards, and it's a running situation. I bet we're going to see a lot of that, especially if their last time in practice on Thursday, they went 0 for 3. So I would expect to keep an eye on that, because that is something Helton is not going to let stand. He's gonna put those guys to work on that real fast.
All right, USC is expected to be an elite team in 2017, but there are problems to work through, and nothing that the talent and the coaching staff can't get them through. But there are things to be worked out, and most notably are injuries that are difficult to avoid at times. So they're resting a lot of players, hoping to get them ready for the first week of August. Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles breaking down the USC spring game as we get just hours away at this point, Nick.
Should be a good game. Should be a good practice.
We will see you soon.
Of course, Mark, anytime.